Hyperinflation, it's not just some theoretical concept from economics textbooks. It's a destructive force that has collapsed entire nations, wiped out life savings overnight, and turned strong currencies into worthless paper. And it's not just something from the past, the warning signs are flashing again in parts of the world today. In this video, we're going to unpack everything you need to know about hyperinflation, what it is, why it happens, and how it destroys economies from the inside out. We'll look at 4 dramatic case studies, Zimbabwe, Weimar Germany, Venezuela, and Argentina, to understand what really happens when money dies. And most importantly, we will talk about how you can protect yourself and your finances in today's increasingly unstable economic environment. Let's begin with the basics. Hyperinflation is defined as a monthly inflation rate of 50% or more. That might sound academic, but in real terms, it means the price of goods can double every few weeks. Your monthly salary might only be enough to buy a loaf of bread by the time payday comes. Hyperinflation destroys purchasing power at a speed that's hard to comprehend. In a stable economy, inflation may rise by 2 to 3% annually. In hyperinflation, prices can rise over 50% in a single month. But how does hyperinflation start? It usually begins with a government spending more than it earns. Instead of raising taxes or borrowing responsibly, it turns to the printing press. The central bank, often under political pressure, starts creating money to pay off debt, fund social programs, or maintain subsidies. In the short term, this might feel like a solution. But very quickly, the supply of money far exceeds the supply of goods. Prices rise, people lose trust, and the spiral begins. Let's look at real-world examples. We begin with one of the most iconic cases, Weimar Germany. After World War I, Germany was heavily indebted due to reparations imposed by the Treaty of Versailles. The government, already under economic strain, began printing money to pay off its obligations. In 1921, $1 was worth about 60 German marks. By November 1923, it took over 4.2 trillion marks to buy $1. In just 2 years, money became meaningless. Stories from the time tell of people taking wheelbarrows full of cash to buy a loaf of bread. Banknotes were used as wallpaper or burned as fuel because they were cheaper than firewood. Workers were paid twice a day, rushing to spend their wages before they lost value by evening. One iconic photo shows a child playing with stacks of banknotes like building blocks. That's the level of worthlessness that took over. Zimbabwe offers a modern example. In the early 2000s, Zimbabwe's government under Robert Mugabe initiated a land reform program that displaced productive commercial farmers. The agricultural sector collapsed. The country's main source of exports and foreign currency disappeared. With rising unemployment and plummeting tax revenue, the government turned to printing money. By November 2008, inflation reached 89.7 sextillion%. That's 89.7 followed by 20 zeros. Prices were doubling every 24 hours. The Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe issued a $100 trillion note, but it still wasn't enough to buy basic groceries. Shops stopped pricing items in Zimbabwean dollars altogether. People switched to using US dollars, South African rand, or bartering with goods. Eventually, the Zimbabwean dollar was completely abandoned. Venezuela, once one of the wealthiest countries in Latin America, experienced a similar collapse starting in the 2010s. The Venezuelan economy was heavily dependent on oil. When global oil prices fell in 2014, government revenue collapsed. Instead of adjusting spending, the government printed more money to maintain subsidies and pay public workers. Hyperinflation exploded. In 2018, inflation peaked at over 1 million%. Shortages of food, medicine, and electricity became normal. Venezuelans fled the country en masse. Some resorted to mining cryptocurrency just to survive. Even doctors and engineers began working as delivery drivers abroad. The bolivar lost so much value that new currencies had to be issued multiple times. People used WhatsApp groups to track daily price changes because supermarket shelves couldn't keep up. Argentina tells a slightly different story, one of chronic inflation, not one single explosion. Since the 1980s, Argentina has experienced repeated cycles of inflation and default. In 1989, inflation hit over 3,000%. Over 3,000%. In 2001, the country defaulted again, plunging the economy into chaos. People lost access to bank savings, the peso was devalued, and unemployment soared. In the 2020s, inflation again rose above 140% annually. Why? A mix of persistent fiscal deficits, heavy reliance on central bank money printing, and lack of trust in government. Today, many Argentinians prefer saving in US dollars. It's so common that street vendors quote prices in both pesos and dollars. Informal exchange markets thrive. What do all these cases have in common? Loss of confidence. Once people lose faith in their money, they rush to spend it, accelerating inflation. Supply shocks. Whether war, sanctions, or agricultural collapse, all these countries had severe disruptions in production. Monetary expansion. Printing money is a short-term fix that becomes a long-term disaster. Political instability. Weak institutions and lack of transparency worsen the situation. Today, countries like Lebanon, Turkey, Egypt, and even Sri Lanka show troubling signs. In Lebanon, the pound has lost over 95% of its value. In Turkey, despite interest rate hikes, inflation has stayed stubbornly high. In 2022, Turkish inflation passed 80%. So how do we protect ourselves? Diversify assets. Don't keep all your savings in one currency. Consider foreign currencies, gold, crypto, or property. Invest in productive assets. Own things that produce income or retain value, such as rental properties, dividend stocks, or farmland. Understand economic indicators. Watch for signs like central bank money printing, rising deficits, and political gridlock. Build location independence. In worst-case scenarios, having the option to move wealth or even yourself internationally is powerful. Hold some physical cash or hard assets. In hyperinflation, digital money can become unreliable. Physical assets are harder to devalue overnight. One often ignored consequence of hyperinflation is psychological. People stop trusting not just the currency, but the system. It creates anxiety, panic buying, hoarding, black markets, and widespread corruption. In Venezuela, teachers quit schools to work as street vendors. In Zimbabwe, hospitals demanded payment in foreign cash. In Germany, a generation lost all savings and grew up distrusting banks, a factor that arguably contributed to later political radicalization. Some governments respond well, others worsen the crisis. In Weimar Germany, hyperinflation ended when the Rentenmark was introduced, a new currency backed by land. Zimbabwe ended hyperinflation by abandoning its currency altogether. Venezuela tried redenominating its currency repeatedly, but failed to fix the underlying issues. The key is restoring trust either through strong policy, dollarization, or independent central banking. Hyperinflation is rare, but the conditions that lead to it are increasingly common: rising debt, low growth, central bank interference, and political dysfunction. Learn from history, watch for signs, and protect your financial future. Because in every country where it happened, people said the same thing. It can't happen here, and then it did.